The Cubs have finally made a move, signing Japanese starter Shōta Imanaga. Let's discuss on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5 on Thursday, January 11th. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Chris Towers. First time he's been here in a while. Let's talk about Shōta Imanaga, who signed a 4-year, $53 million deal with the Chicago Cubs, which has the option to extend that contract to a 5-year, $80 million deal later on in that contract. Imanaga is 30 years old, coming off a season in Japan with a 2.66 ERA, a 102 whip, 10.6 K per nine, 1.4 walks per nine. Chris, this is a deceptive fastball, a splitter, a sweeper from the left-hand side. Very interesting profile. What do you think about the fit with the Chicago Cubs and overall just what to expect from Imanaga?
It's probably a slightly less than ideal fit if you were, laying out all 30 Major League Baseball teams. Which one could he go to? Wrigley Field, probably not the best one because it is, not a great place for a fly ball pitcher to pitch. And Shōta Imanaga has had struggles keeping the ball in the yard. You might look at his Baseball Reference page and see 1K per nine last year in Japan and think, well, that's not that bad. League average home run per nine in Japan last year was 0.8. So he was, a couple ticks worse. League average in Major League Baseball, 1.2 last year. So I think if you're projecting 1.5 home runs per nine is probably around where you'd put it. That's going to be on the higher side. I would think, based on what we've seen from him, it might be one of the more homer-prone pitchers in baseball. And now it's just a question of how many strikeouts can he get? He was well above average in Japan last season in that regard. How many walks does he issue? He was well below average, better than average, I guess would be the other way to put that in that regard last year. And so, if he can strike guys out an above average clip and keep runners off the bases, then it's a lot of solo home runs. That's not that big of a concern. When I look at, expectations for him, I think of he might get there in a little different way, but maybe someone like Eduardo Rodriguez or Braxton Garrett, guys who are going in the 50 to 60 range at starting pitcher. I think that's probably where Imanaga will end up in ADP, probably where he'll end up in my rankings, but there's certainly upside beyond that. If he, he's got this fastball that doesn't necessarily light up the radar gun, but he's got the good vertical approach angle that makes it play up. The splitter is supposed to be really, really good. So there are, paths to Imanaga finding success. And as we've seen with Kodai Senga and Shohei Ohtani recently, that leap from the Nippon League to the major leagues is not an insurmountable one by any means. So I think it was a smart signing by the Cubs. I love the value there. And, there's a decent chance that he's a pretty good starting pitcher next year.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think there's a lot to like. Worry a little bit about the fly balls and the home runs there, but I think there's a chance that Imanaga has kind of been overshadowed because he came over in the same offseason as Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who signed with the Dodgers, and obviously he's one of the best pitchers to ever come from Japan. So I think as a result, Imanaga has been pushed down a little bit in these early drafts. The ADP, 242.7.
That's going to go way up.
That's going to go up. Now that he has a job, we know where he's going to pitch. If he does wind up in a range similar to Eduardo Rodriguez and Braxton Garrett, that's around 190. And I would still be willing to pay that price. Again, there's a lot to like. If you look at Eno Saris's Stuff Plus metric, Shōta Imanaga led all pitchers last year in the World Baseball Classic. He was even better than his teammate Yamamoto, who signed for all that money with the Dodgers. So I'm not saying he's going to be better than Yamamoto. That's not likely to happen, but I think Imanaga could perform like a top 50 starting pitcher, maybe as your SP3 or 4 in fantasy. How does the rest of the Cubs rotation look, by the way, after this signing? They have Justin Steele, Jameson Taillon, obviously Imanaga. They have Kyle Hendricks, and they do have Jordan Wicks. Chris, if you had to predict, do you think Imanaga gets much higher than the 190 price tag that we're kind of presuming here, or does he kind of settle into that range?
When you look at the ADP right now, Carlos Rodon is 175. That's a very different risk reward profile. There's much lower floor. I think probably much higher ceiling. But you do look at Shane Bieber is right ahead of Carlos Rodon at 175. That feels like an okay spot for Imanaga, where I think it's very unlikely Shane Bieber pitches like an ace ever again. But if those two had pretty similar seasons, it wouldn't surprise me. So I think I could see the 170 to 180 range, but any higher than that, you start to push into guys with real legitimate upside like Gavin Williams and Michael King in a way that I don't think Imanaga you could really justify that given his profile.
All right. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.